Hi, my name is Paul Boyce and I'm here to interview Colette Dutton, who's the Director of Children's Services in Wigan Council.
Hi, Paul. My name's Colette Dutton. I'm the Director of Children's Services here at Wigan Council. I'm delighted that you've come to Wigan today, Paul, and we've got some of our brilliant students at Wigan and Lee College filming us today and helping us to edit this interview. So thanks, guys.
I hope they are really good at their job. I can really edit all the rubbish out of this and make it sound like sensible human beings and fully grown-up people. So, Colette, you've got the best job in the world, haven't you? You're
Absolutely.
Director of Children's Services, and even better in Wigan. So, just tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a director and what are the key issues that you see in your role?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Paul. So a little bit about my journey. I started as a social worker many years ago. And I suppose in essence, I've just absolutely loved every single role I've done in social work, whether that's be a team manager in an adoption team, IRO. I've loved it all. So just in essence, I suppose, I've just chosen different roles to have different experiences and ultimately ended up as a DCS here in Wigan, which, as you say, Paul, is the best job in the best place. So, yeah.
Sounds like you got there by accident, Colette, when you say that. So you didn't have any plans to become a director, you just ended up being one, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, I suppose my personal history is as an adopted child and growing up in a family that fostered children. My mum and dad were foster carers. I always thought there must be a better way to doing this. We had some great social workers that would visit our house, but we also had some not great ones. And I suppose I always thought that I would be able to sort of influence and make sure that children that were in care had maybe a better experience than some of the children that we looked after in our family.
Okay, so there's a real passion and a vocational element to where you got to and where you are now.
Yeah.
So as the Director of Children's Services, what are the kind of things that you need to do on a day-to-day basis, and then also a little bit about your role in the Greater Manchester area and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose principally my role is about relationships and about making sure that I have good, strong relationships with services and people that will make a positive difference to children and young people in Wigan. So I spend a lot of my time formulating and I suppose working on those relationships in formal ways, of course, through different governance routes, but also informally, and also not just looking inwards to Wigan. Making sure that we do look outwards, hence our relationship with Coral Reef that I know we'll come on to, but certainly across GM and into the Northwest and wider, because there's good practice in lots and lots of places, and we know that we want to learn from other places where people are doing things really well for their children and young people. And of course, not just in children's social care, my job is around making sure that we've got services across Wigan for children and young people to really ensure that they reach their potential, but particularly around education and social care are, of course, my statutory responsibilities. And I think the other bit about relationships is it's not just about children's services. Across the council, children's services is seen as a key priority. But equally, my relationships with my corporate colleagues in leisure, in housing, across the piece are all critical to make sure that we've got the best offer for children and young people here in Wigan.
Okay, of course, Wigan's famous for its deal, isn't it?
It is famous for its deal, yeah.
So how does that impact on children and young people and the deal?
So it's been brilliant because we've had that real blueprint, I suppose, very much led by adult services previously, about really trying to keep the Wigan pound in Wigan and shape locally the market, particularly around placements for adults with learning disabilities and, of course, for our older population. So we've really took the best of what's been already completed in adult services and made that work for children. So that deal with the community, as I say, to keep our people in Wigan and close by, so we're not having to identify placements or facilities outside of Wigan to meet people's needs. We can really try to shape the market locally, so we can do it ourselves here.
Well, that sounds really interesting, actually. So I used to be a director of children's services.
Did you, Paul?
I did for a while. And I think from memory, it's not that long ago, but it is, as you say, the best job in the world. But it's also got lots of challenges associated with it. And I'm particularly interested in some of the issues, particularly around the workforce, the social work workforce, and the relationships that councils have, when you talk about looked after children, with other organisations that provide care for children. So from your point of view, what are those the two challenges that you would recognise as being the biggest ones, or are there others? And then if they are, just tell us a little bit about how you're tackling the workforce issues, and then how you're tackling the issues with regards to the care of children.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think they are the key pressures that occupy directors' time. And of course, what sits beneath that are two things. One is the quality of the provision that we're giving to our children and young people. And secondly is the budget impact. So making sure, we're as effective and as efficient as we can be, but delivering the absolute best. So yeah, those two issues have been very prevalent for us in Wigan on our improvement journey. So in terms of our workforce, we had a much depleted workforce, particularly around social workers, when I started in Wigan, and we've worked really hard over the last 2 years on a number of different, I suppose, work streams, but the most successful has been about the grow your own. We weren't in a position to do a lot of that at the start because we needed to make sure we had experience in our social work teams. We couldn't afford to have lots of newly qualified staff, but we are in a different position now. So we've got a great mix across our staffing groups. And essentially we've gone from, we've doubled our workforce. So we've had great investment from the council, corporately and of course politically, to have grown our social work workforce. So we've doubled the number of social workers that we have in our establishment, which of course is a great thing, but also means that you can't knit social workers. So we've had a big reliance on agency staff really up to this year. But now the different work streams we've had around our workforce strategy have really paid off. So this month we are almost 80% permanent workforce of social workers, which is brilliant. We've grown our academies in terms of our AYSE offer. We know that we do very well with retention rates now. We're in over 80% in terms of our retention rates of social workers. And fundamentally, we know that social workers either leave Wigan, if they leave, for a promotion, or to go to agency. It's not that they express dissatisfaction with working in Wigan. And in fact, those staff, when we've done our exit interviews that are leaving for agency, are purely talking about the financial gains of that rather than knowing it will deliver any different in terms of quality, because our caseloads are low now in Wigan. For our AYSEs, we're on 12, and for our social work staff, our average is 17. So we're in a good place around delivering quality services, but we know the pull of agency in terms of the cost of living crisis, the context that we're working in, is still high. So a few of the things we've done around our workforce, apart from grow our own, is we're very, very involved with our colleges and universities locally. So as we said today, we're here at Wigan and Lee College, who've been fantastic in terms of facilitating some of our strategy around the rest of our workforce, which has been predominantly about residential staff. They're working really hard with us about how we can grow that market so that we've got better choice in Wigan, and we've got more people with more experience coming into that market. We also work with Edge Hill and the Manchester universities around our social work course, put quite a bit of resource into a little sort of workforce unit, which I think has paid massive dividends. So we've got 2 or 3 really key, enthusiastic, creative staff who will go around the universities. They'll deliver some of the lectures around the front door and the frontline work, which of course, you know, students find really interesting. But of course, they'll be delivering the message about Wigan at the same time, and that has really paid dividends, so much so that we keep in touch. So I was having a conversation actually only yesterday with a couple of these staff who were talking about an example of someone who'd heard them speak over 18 months ago, who'd said, I'm really interested in Wigan when I qualify. They'd kept in touch, only little things, you know, sent them the odd new piece of research, or just had a phone conversation to ask how the course was going, etc. And actually that person's now ready and he's coming to Wigan. So just some of those, again, back to relationships, is really, really paying off for us. And then, of course, once our staff are here, a real focus on retention, making sure we've got the absolute best offer around support, learning, training, and just that general sort of informal networking that we offer. I mean, Wigan Council has got a great offer anyway for employees. We've got the leisure centre, literally the swimming pool sits underneath where the social work offices are. But there is that real, I suppose, that real kindness about being a Wigan employee that offers, you know, support outside of your service area as well. Do volunteering days. We've got lots of assets. We've got Hay Hall. We've just had our levelling up bid agreed for there, so that's going to be a fantastic opportunity. We've got a massive facility at the Lake District, right on the lake, that we use for our looked after children. We can use for team building. So as I say, there's some great assets for us in Wigan to retain and make sure that our staff, you know, feel the love and want to stay with us.
It's really heartening to hear, actually, Colette, because I mean, I hear I work with a number of councils, and I hear the story about workforce being the biggest challenge. And there's a risk that you externalise that challenge and see it as something you can't do anything about. But actually what you're describing is little things make cumulatively a big difference.
Yeah.
And yet, in the context of nearly 8,000 vacancies nationally, you've got an 80-20 split in terms of permanent staff, which is obviously good for children, isn't it?
Absolutely.
For the kind of relationship building that you need with families. So it's really interesting to listen to what you were saying there about being proactive and taking responsibility and finding these little things that make the life of a social worker a bit more enjoyable and tolerable. I mean, I was interested in the swimming pool being beneath.
Absolutely. What more can you want?
About drowning, so they learn to swim. And that's
absolutely.
It's
it's all a skill.
All the skills are there, yeah. Life-saving skills. So in that, you mentioned there around the relationship with the college and with the other challenge really around the workforce that is there or maybe not there so much as needed in the provision of care for children.
Yeah.
So what's the situation like in Wigan with regards to the relationship with the care market?
Yeah. So our relationship and our market shaping is going very well in Wigan, but it's not been an easy task, and it's took us certainly the last 2 years, and we've employed the support of Coral Reef to assist us with that for a couple of different reasons. One is we in Wigan hadn't invested particularly in our what was called commissioning at that time. As I've just talked about, we hadn't followed the same story as adult social care, so we were behind really where we needed to be, so we needed to accelerate that. We also had an increase in our looked after children because our thresholds were realigned to, well, nearly 3 years ago now, rightly, which meant that actually we were looking after more of the right children and facilitating them in terms of their permanence plans. So we employed Coral Reef, as I say, on a number of fronts. One in particular really, I suppose, was to give us some of the expertise and understanding about how you do actually market shape. So, you know, we knew about building relationships, but actually what we weren't sighted on is how do those relationships necessarily feel if you're a provider. So actually, if the first time or if the only time you ever have contact with Wigan Council is on a Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock when we're desperately searching for a placement, you're going to have that view of Wigan Council that we're a crisis-led organisation that's possibly quite unreasonable and isn't planning ahead in terms of our children that we care for. So we've really spun a lot of that on its head, and I suppose have built relationships, again locally, with providers often we were already using to encourage them to grow and develop, and also some new providers. So, you know, we've had that sort of band about, you know, we want to work with ethical providers, of course, and there are lots of ethical providers out there. We've found a lot of them in Wigan, and we've really developed that market. And I suppose the way we've done that is by moving away from some of the traditional thinking. So, for example, you know, not having a traditional providers forum, actually talking to providers and saying what would be useful. Yeah, you've got this relationship with us as children's services, but where are the blockers to either for you to either grow or for you to develop and offer something different that maybe meets some different children's needs. So some of the feedback they gave us were things like, you know, working with our planning colleagues. So when we have our sort of forums or get-togethers, there's a whole plethora of services there. So our planning colleagues are there, so everyone's familiar with who's who. They talk everybody through the process, etc. We have our leisure colleagues, so talked a little bit already about the offer for our staff, but also that's an offer for our children and young people in the borough, or in fact if they're outside the borough. So what can our leisure colleagues do to facilitate, I suppose, a really good day for that child or young person? You know, where can we use some of those services? We have Wigan and Lee College, a part of that forum. So as I said, you know, talking about that throughput of staffing and the, you know, what it is we're going to need for the future. So we've got some of that sufficiency coming through. Also, working with our colleagues around children's opportunities. So we have our colleagues around work placements, apprenticeships. We've just had 15 of our young people on a Heinz apprenticeship, which has been absolutely brilliant. So again, relationships with those businesses. And I suppose that's really what's come out of the Coral Reef engagement, that many of us in children's services, you know, are reaching into commissioning or market shaping, but actually it's not really our bag. We've not necessarily got some of those skill sets, and certainly our staff that maybe have been social workers but have ended up in maybe placement finding services. Again, do we really understand the market? Have we got that, you know, business acumen really that allows us to compete and be seen as very credible in that market? So I think that's what it's given us. There's been certainly a lot of modelling done, you know, about engagement, what's important, making sure that, you know, there's frequent contact with our market. You know, it's meaningful. As I say, it's not just when we want something, it's when we've got something we can help you with maybe as well. And I think that sort of picture of being able to just give us advice, expertise, understand also where, you know, some of that that funding sits that is outside of the council, and how you can access that, and enabling us to get into some of those spaces that traditionally we've never needed to be in. We've traditionally had very much a, well, you go and find the placements and we'll provide the children sort of relationship, and a recognition that no longer will pay dividends in terms of getting our children and young people, you know, the absolute best placement and best service. So there's been lots of aspects, you know, like that have really paid off. And I suppose some of the work that Coral Reef has done with our social work staff, so a real understanding that there's not a them and us. Everyone is working to find the best placement and you know, plan of permanence for our children and young people. So some of the practical things about, you know, how do you write a referral form that gives a true picture of young person, but also gives, you know, the positives as well as maybe some of the issues you might encounter, so that there's a really fair reflection and a real understanding of how maybe, you know, the market can shape itself to meet this young person's needs. And then also just that constant crossover between the teams. So, you know, coming to different forums together. We had a Meet the Market, a huge event where we invited businesses within Wigan, but also external to Wigan, to come and meet us, understand a bit about Wigan as a council and as a children's services, and our social work staff were there as well, so they understood, you know, the importance of making sure we have that sufficiency for the future. So yeah, I think, you know, there's been learning, massive learning for us across the piece, really, in terms of children's services, in terms of our market shaping. And dare I say, I think Coral Reef has also learnt from us as well. I think there's been, you know, a real mutual relationship that's aided, you know, Coral Reef's understanding of some of the pressures for us, and also, you know, has built our skill set and our experience for us as well.
Listening to you there's a couple of things that jumped into my mind. One was this real example of what is meant by corporate parenting, but extending that out to people who are traditionally seen as being providers of services to children, which is an interesting way of thinking about things, because oftentimes, of course, the provider is the parent, but we've never necessarily seen them as being partly responsible as a corporate parent, and all that wider engagement with across the council and businesses, etc., to try and get a single focus on children. And the second thing that struck me there was about this emphasis on relationships and building relationships. And from what I understand, you're saying about Coral helping you and helping them probably also understand where the dots are that then needed to be joined up.
Yeah.
So, because nothing that they've done seemed to me to be about things that weren't already here. It's about bringing those things together with some common objectives. So that sounds like a quite powerful thing, really. The question I'm moving towards is, and so what now? So because Coral are not part of your organisation. You brought them in to do a job. Sounds like they've done a decent job. So what is the legacy? Well, so what are the benefits, first and foremost, and then what is the legacy for you as a DCS and for the council generally from that work that's been done over the last couple of months or year or so?
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there about, you know, the word is legacy, and that's what, when we first engaged with Coral, that is what we talked about. I had some gaps in some of our market shaping services, but I was very conscious and very clear. I didn't want to create a dependency because, you know, we've got to get on with it on our own. We've invested, we've put that sort of, you know, front-loaded things, if you like, but absolutely we've got to learn, develop, and then, as I say, deliver ourselves. So, you know, certainly I think we've got to that position where it is a legacy that has been left. And we still, you know, we will still touch base on things. So, for example, this week it's National Social Work Week. So we've got Coral doing a session for us, for our social workers. And I think that relationship will continue. But certainly it's been about making sure that our service now understands how we maintain and also grow in the areas that we've been pointed to, introduced to, given the understanding, knowledge, maybe link as well, and then really trying to fly with that. So some of it has been about, I suppose, asking Coral to assist us to shape what some of our structures look like. So a real example of that would be, and many DCSs will be familiar with this, ultimately, no matter how many resources you can put into some of the sort of market shaping, come the Friday afternoon, it's all hands to the deck to try to find that operational placement. So it's very easy to move from that strategic level of relationship building and thinking about the future into that operational all hands to the deck. And I think what we've been good at and we've learned in Wigan is we can't do that, because otherwise we lose our eye on the prize of the greatest efficiency across. So we've split an element of our team. So some of our market shaping staff report directly into myself. I mean, obviously, you know, it's all about making sure that we deliver some really, you know, great placements for our children and young people, but also it's costing us a lot of money to use some of the placements we're currently using, and we know we don't always get value for money. So it's a real focus of mine to make sure, as I said at the beginning, really, you know, we're as effective and as efficient as we can be. And then that allows really the operational placement finding, the liaison between, you know, the social workers and the placement finders to happen without that strategic drive and pace being, you know, affected negatively, if you like. So I think that's been part of the legacy. And then I think just a real understanding, and it's been, of course, incredibly timely. You know, we've had the care review. We've now got some recommendations that, you know, are going to be piloted around, particularly around, you know, commissioning, what that might look like on a regional basis. So I think it's put us on the front foot of having that real understanding about what might work and maybe what's been tried already. But as I say, you know, that legacy will certainly see us, you know, into the future. And, you know, just in terms of some of the outcomes, so in this 2 years, you know, we've done all of that relationship building, etc. But there's been some real, you know, some real solid, you know, cumulative impacts of that. So we've got 19 additional placements for our children and young people, closer to home than we've had before, with those providers that we've got strong relationships with. We've also managed to make some savings because of that. So I think we've made about 1.2 million in terms of our savings, but bigger than that in terms of mitigating future costs. We estimate that it could be as high as 3.5 million that we've mitigated. So again, you know, they're really strong numbers in terms of engaging with our, you know, Director of Finance, who's been incredibly supportive, but of course wants to make sure that the public purse is being used, you know, in the right places. And I think what also Coral Reef has given us is some outside credibility, if you like, that someone else is checking our work, someone from that sort of financial background, you know, that, as I said, has given us some further credibility politically and corporately that actually we're driving in the right direction.
So just in terms of legacy, I was going to pretend that you're the finance director, and I know you're not, but if you were the finance director, I would assume that you got some brownie points there if you managed to save £1.2 million from the cost of care and avoid potentially 3 million additional costs, presumably annually.
Yeah.
Which is a different direction of travel to what a lot of councils experience at the minute, where those controls appear to be out of control, and there's a lack of, I think, probably confidence maybe in how you can control it. I am seeing councils wanting to open up their own kids' homes and all this stuff. You think, well, actually, that's not necessarily the answer to the question or the problem we're trying to solve. You know what? It's more of a rhetorical thing, really, because obviously it's been a number of reviews nationally around issues to do with the social work profession and around the whole issue of early help and child protection, and also a review of the care market. And one of the recommendations from the review of the care market has been to establish more regional approaches, which feels a little bit different to what you've done here, which is a localised response. So it'd be interesting to see how those things pan out. I think from my perspective, I can see more advantages with localism than I can with regionalism. Because we've been down that road actually in the northwest. We've had regional frameworks and didn't really have the level of sophistication. And I'd be really interested to see how your local providers respond to that as well, because what you're describing is relationships that are based around people rather than frameworks and, you know, perhaps more blunt instrumentary. So just on the stuff, we'll finish off a little bit about the future and the optimism maybe around the national reforms. Are there any things that you think are important that people should be thinking through at the minute around the reform agenda, and how well placed do you think Wigan is to respond?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, what we've done in Wigan is about, you know, working locally. However, I think the learning we've got from how we've done things in Wigan, and we're still developing, you know, we're nowhere near there yet. I think, you know, with the stuff that we can take into those conversations regionally. But I think probably, you know, we've had to get on with it in Wigan in an absence of maybe, you know, the stricter sort of market guidance and frameworks that, you know, are in place for adults. You know, we've not had time to wait for that government response, but now we've got that, as I say, you know, we'll want to take our learning into whatever we're able to develop locally. Certainly in terms of the pilots, we're really keen to, you know, to play our part in that and see what we can really make work. Because I think, you know, there is hope. We've demonstrated that in Wigan. And as I say, you know, we're not at the end of the journey by a long shot, but I think we've got the building blocks in place. We're seeing that it's paid dividends for our children and young people. You know, our children and young people have been significant in this journey with Coral Reef as well. You know, they've been you know, part of those conversations, part of shaping what things need to look like, part of telling us what they want, as well as what they need. So, you know, keeping our children and young people right at the centre of what we want to do, I think will enable us to go into whatever type of new arrangements, you know, develop and be, you know, be at the fore of trying to shape some of that. And we'll be able to sort of keep our eye on the prize of, as I say, delivering some really great stuff for our children and young people.
Okay, great. And I guess I suppose the other side of this is that the intention nationally is to have less kids in care anyway, isn't it? And that'll be interesting to see how that pans out, because it's bucking a trend which has been going on for a long time. And there's challenges back to your workforce around what role social workers should play in early help and prevention.
Yeah.
But on that note, positive note, thanks very much, Colette, for sharing your experiences in being a leader in your local authority and having the best job in the world.
Thank you. And thanks, guys, to everyone who's helped and filmed us today. Really great to be here at Wigan and Leigh College, so thank you.